Beverley Collier. My father owned the Mangamingi farm, and Keith and I went to live there in 1986 because we couldn't get any of our children to go there. So Keith said, I'll go there myself. And then Cam and Sarah said, we'll come. But they'd already been living out of Wanganui with us on the farm and made a lot of friends there, and it was hard for them to leave and go there. But we took a while to get to know the district because we had no children going to school, but I soon found that it had its own hall and people were very friendly, and we were very happy there.
And I'm Chris Collier, Mum's son, and I was the one that was asked whether I wanted to come out along with my wife Lorraine before Mum moved there. But Mum, the farm, I always used to know the farm as Collier and Beard. How did it get that name, Collier and Beard? The Collier and Beard property?
Well, because I was a Beard, and because it had been the Beard Collier property.
So when do you think the Beards first came into ownership of the Ararata end of the property?
Well, I understood it was 1902.
Yeah, I think that's also when the second block was bought, so it could have been owned before, but anyway, if we start from 1902, apparently it was bought at the Hara sale yards, the second property. Yeah. Was there a road in a council road in from that end originally, or did one have to be negotiated?
I have no idea.
I did talk to Grandpa Beard, my Grandpa Beard, your father, and that's the indication I got, that they had to negotiate with the council actually to get the road into that end. But the second block would have been the back block where you lived with Cam and Sarah, and according to Grandpa Beard, that was just full of fern and scrub. Blackberry at the back, on the back block. So it probably sold for a song in those days, because there was no access apart from through Ararata down to Hara. And that road was a pretty windy road. Do you remember what happened to some scrub cutters on that road one day?
Yes, there were 2 Indian scrub cutters working on the farm.
About what year do you think?
I really don't
Probably
know.
in the 50s, because it was when I was young, I never knew about it.
It might be in the years. And they were wanting to get a train from Howrah back to Wanganui, back to our farm on the Parapara, and nobody would put them up in a hotel in Howrah for the night, so the manager had to bring them back, and on the way they went off the road back to the Ararata end of the farm, and they were all drowned. Oh. The 2 Indians and the manager, was he Tarrant? Would he have been?
Don't know.
And I think he had his wife with him too, and I think the 4 of them were drowned in the stream beside the road. So that was a drama that happened in those days, yes.
So you had a lot of scrub to cut in those days. My understanding from Grandpa was that the last of the bush was cleared in 1914, and Grandpa only took over the farm in 1922. But a lot of it would have gone in the Depression. When you look at the size of the scrub that was on the land, would have gone back to in the Depression, and the back blocks were certainly, which was the flats Mangamingi end, the back blocks were certainly not in good shape. Grandpa reckoned they had a hut out the back, and he used to go live in the hut and shoot pigs. Does he remember telling you any of those stories?
Yes, I think I remember. That's the
Mangamingi.
hut, that cottage, is it still there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it used to be called Kevin's Batch for a while. That's the batch Kevin lived in.
Yes, the old one.
Yeah, the old Warrie.
Yeah.
And that's where Grandpa used to stay
Yeah.
when he'd venture out the back. Yeah. I think that he reckoned he shot something like 32 pigs in 2 hours with a 44 rifle. And some of them were across the gully. I think he would have been a good shot, Grandpa.
Oh, he was, yeah.
Right. How did you know that?
Well, he was always duck shooting, always had a lot of people
Yeah.
out staying for duck shooting.
Yeah. So 32 pigs, that would have been a wilderness out the back if that was the case. I remember also when Kevin was clearing Barbary, when we got the bulldozers into action out there, Kevin reckoned he had the whole of a Teddy 8, what was that small bulldozer he had?
6.
D8.
Not the D8, yeah, Teddy 6, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The whole of a Teddy 6 went under a barberry bush before it hit the trunk. So, so the weeds,
Huge.
out of control, were growing very big at the back block, because remembering that the Ararata end was the main end with the only woolshed. So, if Grandpa took over in 1922, did someone have the? Someone's got the estimations of stock numbers. Was Albie, wouldn't it?
Not as early as that.
No,
Albie's only got them from when he went there. But Walter Dool was the
Yep.
manager in those days. And my father was only very young, and if you say he took over in that time, and the Farmers Co-op would have managed the farm, possibly.
Yep.
Len Bremer.
Yes, that's a familiar name, yes, yes.
There was a very good story written by Peter Marshall about coming up to the farm, and because Dad used to fly him up to the farm to, because when Dad took over the farm, he also switched to what was that firm?
Murray Robertson Co.
Murray Robertson Co. And so that's why Peter Marshall used to come up, because they'd switched firms at that stage.
And Peter Marshall was a wool man, wasn't
Yes,
he?
yeah. And so he's got some very interesting stories which we might relay later on about his adventures on the plane, etc.
But that's why Keith learnt to fly, because it was taking him such a long time to drive from the farm on the Fields track. I said the Parapara before, but it was Fields track where we lived, and up to the farm here would take him about 3 hours. But when he got his own plane, he could sort of get up in about 25 minutes. And I studied his logbook last night and found that he'd done over 620 trips from Kakatai to Mangamingi. And that was just a rough count. And before that, the Wanganui Aero Club used to let him take a 150. And I didn't count how many times he came up on the 150, and the Wanganui Aero Club would only charge him for his flying time. He could have the plane away all day. And then the Wanganui Aero Works, which did all our top dressing, said they had a 180 for sale, an old top dressing plane. They'd teach him to fly it, and they cleaned all the super out of it, and he bought it very reasonably from them, but he had to give up flying in 1988 because he was a diabetic and insulin dependent, and they wouldn't give him his license any longer. But by that time, we were living up on At Mangamingi anyway. And what year did the road go in?
Oh, right. So what happened was in the 60s. So there's a whole lot of development took place in the 60s, including Dad getting his aeroplane and getting the airstrip set up, etc., etc. So what year did Dad get the plane or get his license?
He got it in 64. He started to learn to fly. He got the plane, the 180, 66.
About 66.
Yes.
Yeah, according to some notes that I did on the history of the farm, I made the notes up in 1985, but according to those notes, the total stock units on the farm were 5,900, nearly 6,000, just under 3,000 ewes, plus cattle, yeah. Plus cattle, getting about 8,500 stock units. In those days, 500 acres had already gone into the QE2 Trust. That's the bush area, minus that would be not including the bush flats. So he must have started clearing the bush flats at about that time too.
Did Kevin clear the bush flat with the bulldozer?
Yep, it would have been the D8 doing that. That would have been Peter Ryan. Because both Peter and Kevin were up there with bulldozers at the same time.
But according to Albie Mullins, Peter did most of the road in. And
Yes,
Ben
that's
Young
right.
had been out to have a look at it. He was our MP, was that?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And I thought that really Keith had approached our MP, who was Roy Jack.
Okay.
And it was a paper road that went into
Yes, it was
the
a paper
farm.
road.
And Roy Jack got the assistance for the metalling and culverting if we did the bulldozing. Would that be right?
Yeah, that paper road goes right into the farm. It actually continues right through to the Moria Valley Road.
Does it? Yeah.
But it's only where we stopped it. We didn't need to do the other part of the road. But essentially the paper road goes right through. So the key to developing the farm really was putting that road in, getting an airstrip, which I think was pretty flat anyway, the bottom airstrip in the gully. But Dad was keen on getting a lot of super on the farm, and he used the ridge line on the way in through Hardwick Smith's property to build the big airstrip, so the super wouldn't have to be. In the old days, you used to fly the super off from a valley and have to climb and fertilise the farm instead of going straight off the high airstrip and going straight across the farm. And so at that time, it was very fortunate that the government was handing out a whole lot of incentives for people to develop their farms.
That's right. We got, yes.
LDEL.
So the first one was actually in 1966. Apparently there was a $30,000 loan from the Rural Bank to put in the all-weather road access. And when that was done, I think the logging of the trees from the bush was done, and the timber and the income from the timber was used to build the wool shed and the shearers' quarters and the manager's house, which later became your house, Sarah. So they used that and the loan, and I think they put in 5 mile of fencing at the same time. So there was quite a lot done, but the harvesting of the logs was part of the native timber on the bush flats, and up in the hills was done, and this electricity reticulation had to come in across the river. So that was pretty big. So all those things. Implement shed and hay barn as well. Yeah. Actually, I've got here 7 1/3 miles of hunter type fencing. And they purchased 2,100 ewe hoggets at 85 shillings each.
Gosh.
That's a little bit of detail. But that was just the first bit. Then they got 1977. They got a $100,000 development loan from Royal Bank to cut scrub, fence, top dress, 320 hectares, and purchase another 3,000 ewes. And that's when they used the money to get the big bulldozer in. Oh, sorry, the roller crushing. They must have had the big bulldozer. But Dad had seen a program on Country Calendar, you remember, of roller crushing up in Gisborne. And he thought, oh, we could do the same. And so all the Razorback, a lot of those ridges were Razorback ridges, and they just took them down. One was taken down about 30 feet, I think, in height to get down to a level area. And it was beautiful fencing afterwards because you already had a bulldoze ridge, and you could easily drive a vehicle up either side of the fence just about to put the fence in. And but the idea was to he bought a boiler, and I don't know where he bought the boiler from. Eltham. He probably got Hodders in Eltham to put pleats on the side of the boiler, and they got and then they loaded it up to the D8 and rolled it down. I think the first time they rolled it down, it snapped the cable.
I remember that. And Kevin said he could have done it all with a pocket knife or something.
And the trouble was the boiler was too heavy. And they took it into town, and there was a whole lot of pipes in the boiler, and apparently they cut out, I'm going to guess now, about 5 ton of steel out of the inside of the boiler to lighten the weight of the boiler. And then they discovered that the easiest way to crush the scrub was not to roll it. You'd roll it down, it would slide down wherever it wanted to go, and then you'd just move the bulldozer around the ridge. And the cable itself would just flatten all this scrub, because the scrub was 40 feet high. It was scrub from the Depression days. So it just ripped over. And when you pull the roller up again, it would crush it all down, so you could just about walk over a little depth of scrub. So it made for a beautiful fire. But prior to that, when they've been cutting scrub, all the scrub was tangled up, and you try to put a fire through it and just end up with a whole lot of sticks. You had a paddock called the Sticks, didn't you, out there somewhere? Still have. And that's Sticks of Manuka, but it's probably all rotted away now.
Yes.
But that's so the first attempts, there was quite a lot of scrub was cut prior to the roller crusher, but the roller crusher was aimed to get rid of the rest of it, really. And pretty much all of it.
The first time I came out, Kevin was using the scrub, the bulldozer with the roller.
Oh, yes.
In the back burn.
Yes, just finishing off there.
I watched him do that, crushing the scrub. And then some of the paddocks, the names of the paddocks are named by the person that lit the match to burn the paddocks after the scrub cutting.
Do you want to tell the story about how they regrass some of the land out there?
No.
Dad's regrassing technique from the aeroplane.
No, I don't remember.
He took the door off the aeroplane and strapped Kevin in with the seed, and his theory was if he flew along the gullies and Kevin just poured the seed out the back, it would fertilise it would stick the seed all over that. So Dad reseeded the hills with Kevin in the back with the sack of seed.
I don't remember that.
You've heard that story, haven't you? Oh, gee. So in those days with the fertiliser, it was because that land had reverted. One paddock even got 800 weight of super as a capital dressing to kick-start the grass in it and clover. Otherwise, it was only going to go back to scrub again pretty quickly. And then in the year after that $100,000 loan in 1977, in 1978, there was the Land Development Encouragement Scheme and the Livestock Land Development Encouragement Scheme and the Livestock Incentive Scheme. Mr. Muldoon, and Dad said, Dad once made the comment that it was thanks to Muldoon that the farm became what it was. Because those financial kick-starts were not around in those days, and of course when Roger Douglas came along he said, we shouldn't have any incentive for farming, and took them all off again. But and and there was some writing off of those loans in those days, and there was $17,500 was written off the livestock incentive scheme. Yeah, but it did mean that stock numbers had to be pushed up to quite a high level. The high airstrip was used by, it'd be Whanganui Aeroworks would have done the job, wouldn't it? And so they used their Fletchers off the high strip, and you'd see the plane take off and it would drop down afterwards, heading towards the bottom flats, and but it could make its way up and over the high country, so it never had to do a circle to get up to height.
And I was just thinking, if he did his own, all the neighbours would want theirs done as well.
Yeah. But there's a whole lot of stories about Dad coming up on the plane before you moved up, Mum. Peter Marshall talked about the time when Dad came over to clear the strip, and there was some stock in the yards, and the manager wasn't very happy about the fact that all the stock bolted when Dad was and broke out of the yards and that sort of thing. So Dad wasn't always popular because he'd come up, maybe the plane caused some disturbances, and then he'd take off at the end of the day to be home. Do you remember how late Dad got home sometimes?
It was a big part of him managing the farm, and when the buildings were being done, he was up day after day, according to his logbook, which to Takatai to Mangamingi and home again. Yes. And of course, then when we were living there was the time that he put the plane disappeared from sight over the bank when he was landing.
Well, it was tricky. It was a tricky one. So that was the bottom airstrip, and
you were there then,
Sarah. Do you remember? But I heard I wasn't there, but I heard the story that
John Morrison and Noel Smith on board.
John Morrison, Noel Smith.
Yeah. He came into land. He'd made several attempts, but the crosswind was too tricky, and you were trying to. Yeah, I don't know what you were doing. You and
Dorothy and I.
What did you say? Go away. Go to Howrah. Don't try and land here. But he did. He came in and he couldn't stop, and he just went over the end.
Yes.
Blackberry bushes in the gully.
And we hadn't been there very long, and I didn't know how deep the gully was. They just disappeared, went through the fence and disappeared from sight. Dorothy said they'll all be dead, and I thought there'll be some broken bones. But when we got through the fence and looked down, the three of them were standing outside the plane.
So that plane was a Cessna 180, and it was originally a top dressing plane of the Whanganui Aeroworks.
Yes,
and I believe Dad bought it in about 1967.
65, I think.
So it was £2,500 Dad bought it for. He took out the hopper and put in a couple of seats in the back, and the dogs used to fly with them. So there was an article written in the New Zealand Farmer, The Flying Farmer, because the dogs would be hovering over his neck and enjoying the ride, and then he put the dogs back in at the end of the day and fly home.
Wow.
Yes, it was 65 he bought.
65,
yes. And no, he had a lot of pleasure out of that. And once he moved to Mangamingi, he still used it a lot to go to sales at different parts of the country, and I didn't have time to look at it very much last night, but it was very interesting, yes.
I'm Sarah, Bev's daughter-in-law. I was married to Cam, who sadly passed away 10 years ago now. We were farming together at Mangamingi.
What made you move from Mataitera to Mangamingi?
Well, we moved to Mangamingi because Cam's younger brother Rob and his wife Amanda were going to farm the Mataitera farm ultimately, and Bev and Keith had decided they would move to Mangamingi. And farming wasn't easy then. Interest rates had gone up to about 18%, 21%. There was really little option to buy another property at that time, so we moved, and it was great. I've loved living there. Yeah, you sort of had your 100 acres, didn't you, on the farm, which was bordered by Lake Rotorangi, which used to be the Patia River. And Keith sort of, he bought the Wagyus, and you sort of farmed that separately on your own with Chris.
No, I don't remember that.
Yes, yeah. You subdivided you subdivided off the house and the 90 acres, and you farmed it separately, for a while.
Yes.
And that's why you sold the house and not the farm. When you moved to Wanganui, you put it on the market. Remember?
Oh, that was a separate title.
Yeah. Dad made a separate title.
Oh, yeah.
And so Cam and I farmed the rest of the farm, and Albie was with us too, but a few years later he retired. We had two boys, Neil and Andy Gavin, who left school to come on work for us, and Andy, when Albie retired, Andy moved over to the Howrah end and lived in Albie's house, Albie and Margaret's house, and so he sort of oversaw that end of the farm, but we farmed it together, whereas prior to that, Albie and the manager, who had changed there were quite a few different managers on the Mangamingi end, but Albie always had the Howrah end, and the two managers farmed separately, really, didn't they? The young stock were at the Mangamingi end, and the breeding stock were farmed mostly on the steep hill country at the Howrah end.
What was the total acreage, Sarah?
Total acreage of the farm? Well, I think in those days about 4,500 acres, and then in 1990 Cam and I bought 900 acres, which was over in the Tongahoe, and we farmed the hoggets there for a few years, but they didn't do well. It was, the farm was fairly hungry, it hadn't been fertilised, there was a lot of bid, and the hoggets didn't do well, and we ended up putting it into pine trees, which we grazed for about 7 years until you can't graze it any longer, and it just became a productive forest. Anyway, after Albie retired, Andy lived over in the Howrah end of the farm, and Neil was over at our end of the farm, but we farmed together. It all became one farm. Most of the shearing and the stock work was done at the Mangamingi end. We did use the Howrah end a bit, but when wool prices went down and ewe prices went down, we went through sort of a fairly difficult patch. We did mothball the Howrah end, the wool shed and the yards, and we just used the Mangamingi end mostly.
So tell me, how did you get into farming in the first place? How did you sort of get on the farm? Shut up, on a farm.
I love it, man.
I met Cam in London. So he didn't want to, he went to university, and he didn't complete his degree, but he went off, did his OE, and finally ended up in London, and I was nursing in London. I was doing my training and met him at a party, as you do. And so we were together for about well, we met in 74, we married in 77 in England, and Bev and Keith came out to the wedding. And in 76, February 76, I managed to I did some night duty and I got my nights off and my annual leave, and I managed to fly out with Air India, I think it was, or Air Garuda, one of those cheap airlines, to New Zealand. Cam had come home. He'd been living overseas for about 2 or 3 years.
Yes, I don't know how
he just
long.
wanted to come home, see family, but wasn't ready to come back to New Zealand to live. So he came back here for 6 months, and it was in 76, it was during that time that I came over. So I met Bev and Keith for the first time then. Had a look around the farm. I hadn't any idea that I would end up living in New Zealand at that stage. And then we were married in 77. About 78, 79, I think I'd certainly had enough of living in London, and I think we were probably looking at moving back towards Somerset, where my family live. And then we got a call from you, Bev.
Oh,
Or a letter which said the shepherd was leaving, there'd be a house available, would we come home?
oh. Well, we didn't ever think Cam would be a farmer. Chris was our choice as the best farmer in the family, and he didn't follow.
You didn't follow the script, Chris. I was good at hoeing thistles when I was young. As a kid, they used to pay me $1.10 an hour and then $1.40 an hour. I was on a good wicket.
And so did you learn to ride a horse? And
I'd already learnt. I've always loved horses, and so
dogs?
no, I hadn't had that. I'm a bit of an animal lover, right, from a small child, but hadn't trained dogs or had much experience with dogs up until I came out to New Zealand. But I've ridden horses since I was about 7. And I suppose it's a little bit sort of that romantic concept of out there on horseback mustering, but that's what they were doing in 76. You were using the horses for mustering. And when I came out for that holiday, there was a horse to ride, and so I did go out with the horses and with the guys.
Oh yes, we were most impressed with Sarah.
Don't get me on a horse.
But when I came out to live, the motorbikes and the three-wheelers in those days were just starting to take over, and the horses became surplus to requirements. But there was a horse that hadn't been broken in when I arrived, I remember, and Keith sent it off to somebody in Oakuni to be broken. It was away for about 3 or 4 weeks, and when it came back, I had Juliet, our first, just a tiny wee baby, and I couldn't put the mileage into that horse, and she was a shocker. She was called Thatcher.
Oh, yeah.
And she was an iron lady, all right. But so that was just recreational riding, really. But I tried to, when we came over to Mangamingi, we brought over a couple of horses, and I tried to ride as much as possible.
And Sarah's still riding.
For stock, yeah, for shifting stock. But
And you're involved with what's your riding group called?
Riding for Disabled.
Yeah,
Yes, got very involved with Riding for Disabled in Stratford. So it's a shame we don't use horses more for stock work, because I know that we try and fit so much into the day that the four-wheelers are the most practical thing to use. You can carry your tools and whatnot, but working dogs on horseback is so much better.
Yeah, you're sort of a London girl, and now you're in the back blocks of Mangamingi in the middle of nowhere. That's a huge change of lifestyle.
Well, she has a daughter-in-law who grew up in Mexico City
Yes.
and who's living out there now.
I do remember though when I came out for the first time and we went up to Mataitia on Fields Track, and I'd flown into, I suppose from Auckland or Wellington, I think it was, up to Wanganui. Cam met me at Wanganui and we drove up the Paraparas, which was, in 76 was just a goat track really, very windy, and I kept saying, are we there yet? And all the hills of the Paraparas, it was like nothing I'd seen before. It was like, I don't know, craters of the moon, you know, and it was just, the scenery when we got to the top was just out of this world. And I even now, I don't take it for granted. I still think the scenery's amazing.
Yes, it is.
That was my experience too when Keith took me to show me where we were going to live at Mataitia. He took me up over through Mangamingi and up over the Burma Road instead of taking me up the Parapara, which
just to frighten you.
and fortunately we had an accident on the way up, so I never got as far as the Burma Road. I don't know whether I would have gone if I thought that was my only access.
Wow. So on the entertainment side of things, did you go to the Mangamingi Hall and join in all the, you know?
Yes, and it was great because where we'd lived before on Fields Track, there was a school, but no community hall or anything. So it was great getting to know the district through having a hall there.
Yeah.
Cam and I did a lot of fencing and planted riparian plants just to make mustering easier. Well, I planted quite a few exotics, I suppose, because being English, I loved the autumn colours, and so quite a few oaks and ashes, copper beech, interspersed with the natives. So spring and autumn are really pretty, looking across the flats, aren't they, with all the colours. Well, when the children were little, I couldn't get out on the farm so much because of, well, you can't with small babies, and even when they're at school, you know, you've got your commitment, all the school activities and school bus. So I could go and help down in the yards and close to home, but I couldn't go out the back. So I got very involved with the garden, and I built stone walls. I'd pick up.
Oh yes, you did a lot of work.
Stones we had about 2 good-sized metal pits on the farm.
Yes.
Which are pretty well exhausted now, but there were some lovely smooth river stones, and I made a stone wall going up our driveway. And then do you remember the story when you and Keith went down in the truck? It was probably one of the last jobs the truck did, and picked up all those bricks near Wellington for your fireplace.
Yes, vaguely.
For your house.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes.
And you tipped them off. At
Yes.
that,
that's right. Yes.
corner coming out of Paraparam or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes. I'd forgotten all about that. Yes.
But anyway,
yes.
these bricks finally came home, and you used what you needed to use, and then they were carted through to Albie's end. He wanted to use the remaining bricks for a driveway, and then there were still bricks left over. So then I brought them back and used them for steps in the garden. So we used them up in the end.
Yes.
They were damming up the Partia River.
As we were going there.
As we were going there, so about
Yes.
84, 85.
Yes.
And we were at the head of the lake, really. So I think it's the longest lake, hydroelectric lake in the country, with the dam down near the Partia end, about 45 kilometres south. And I think all the locals were quite excited for a little while, thinking it'd be great for jet boating and wakeboarding and things like that. But it's got fairly silted up now.
Has it? Yes. Kevin had a boat too, didn't he?
Yes, and Keith. And Keith.
Did we have a? I don't.
You had a
Water
boat.
skis. With water skis.
After Kevin had his boat, Dad got a boat.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Water skis.
Yeah.
Yep. So, the other, I suppose, interesting thing is just as we arrived at Mangamingi, the school roll was down to about 5, I think, or maybe 5, 8, perhaps, and three of them went off to high school, which left 5, and so Cam was on the board, and the board decided to close the school at that stage. It was just too small, and so we took our children to Rawetarawa School, which was also very small. There were about 15 children there. And so the Mangamingi School became an outdoor pursuit centre for a bit, didn't it?
It did. That was the plan.
That was the
It
plan.
didn't actually.
No. They carted the cavalry, the old Calvary Hospital from Howrah.
Yeah.
And you were very against the school closing, I remember. Was it?
Me?
Yes. I think of you as didn't want that school to close. Yeah.
Well, let's put it another way. I was bloody grateful that the school building went to Road Kerry anyway.
Oh yes, in the end.
Yeah.
And then the concrete from around the courtyard at the school must have just been in piles in the schoolyard.
Yeah.
And I grabbed it, and it's my paving around the swimming pool at home.
Yeah.
So nothing goes to waste.